Thank you everyone again for attending our application process workshop. Our presenters today are Alyssa Luna, Senior Admissions Counselor for Multicultural Recruitment and Outreach at IUPUI, and Karina Garduno, Senior Associate Director in the IUPUI Multicultural Success Center. Thank you to our presenters for joining us, and please take it away.
Hi, everyone. I'm Alyssa Luna. Like Ashley mentioned, I'm an admissions counselor in the Office of Undergraduate Admissions with IUPUI, and I'll let Karina briefly introduce herself also.
Hello, everyone. My name is Karina Garduno. My pronouns are she, her, hers, and I work at the Multicultural Center here at IUPUI.
Awesome. So we'll go ahead and get started. So as this workshop mentioned, we're going to talk about how to apply to college. So looking at different college types, different things that you would need. So not just IUPUI, really any school that you're looking to apply to. So the general application requirements. We'll talk a little bit about test optional because we know that is something that we're seeing more and more often in college applications. We'll talk about deadlines and then also just some overall tips and reminders. All right, so first we'll kind of talk a little bit about our in-state versus out-of-state when you're looking at colleges or universities to apply to.
Wonderful. Thank you, Alyssa. So as Alyssa mentioned, we will be talking about in-state versus out-of-state. So what is the difference between in-state and out-of-state? Well, for our in-state colleges, it's very simple. They're the colleges that are here in Indiana. And there are a couple of advantages to going to school in-state. One of them is lower tuition costs. Usually if you stay in-state, the cost is a little bit cheaper than if you went out-of-state. It's more comfortable. You're familiar with the state. You might even be familiar with the area, depending on where you decide to go. So that's something to think about. It's closer to home. So if anything happened or if you felt homesick, it would be a little bit easier for you to travel home than if you were out of state. And if you stay in state, you might be able to qualify for some of the programs that will help you pay for college. One of those being 21st Century, if you're an individual who's a U.S. citizen or permanent resident. A couple of the disadvantages, though, of staying in state is it limits your options, right? You only have the options that the state has for you to choose from. And it might not be as exciting as going to another state or going to another city to experience something new. So our out-of-state colleges are obviously colleges that are not in the state of Indiana. And some of the advantages to going out of state is you get to experience something different, right? For some of you, you might see this as one of the only chances to get out of the state or go away for a while before deciding where you want to live permanently. So that's something to think about. And then there's also more colleges to choose from. If you decide to go out of state, you have all of the colleges wherever you decide to go. So that gives you more options to look at. Some of the disadvantages, though, of going out of state is you are further from home. So depending on how far you go, you might not be able to come home as often, or, you know, if you get homesick, it won't be as easy to come and visit your family. And usually tuition for out-of-state students is more expensive. Here at IUPUI, where Alyssa and I work, the difference in tuition is almost double. So I would say that on average, our in-state students will pay about $10,000 a year, whereas our out-of-states will pay about $20,000 a year. So there's also choosing between public and private colleges. So what's the difference between those? Our public colleges are colleges that are government funded. They receive money from the government. So usually these colleges will be a little bit cheaper than private colleges. They will also offer a wide array of programs. So these are the ones that you'll see a lot more choices for you to choose from. And they also offer more opportunity for student involvement. They tend to be a little bit bigger, so there's more for you to do on campus and organizations to join. Some of the disadvantages, though, is that they cannot offer institutional aid to our DACA and undocumented students. So that might be something to think about. And usually your classes are going to be a little bit larger because the institution is going to be a little bit larger. So some of our more notable public universities here in Indiana are IU and Purdue. So our private colleges are colleges that rely on tuition and endowment. So they are absolutely hoping that you will come to their school so that they can fund whatever they need to fund, and that they're getting donors that will help pay for some of that. Some of the advantages, though, of going to a private college would be that they offer generous financial aid. So they don't have some of the limitations that some of the public universities have when it comes to financial aid. They can offer aid to our DACA and undocumented students if they wanted to, because they are privately funded. So that's something to think about. Usually the classes are going to be a little bit smaller because the universities are going to be a little bit smaller. And a lot of these universities have specific focuses. So some of them will be religiously affiliated. Some of them will be male and female colleges only. Some of them have a specialization in the liberal arts. So their curriculum tends to be a little bit more specific. Some of the disadvantages, though, of going to private colleges would be the cost of attendance is typically higher than if you went to a public university. They offer fewer academic majors because they are a bit smaller. And because they are smaller, there may be a limited amount of student involvement opportunities for you to get to be a part of. So again, some of our notable private colleges are Marian University and then also Goshen College. So aside from the university types, there's also, do you want to go to school for 4 years? Do you want to go to school for 2 years? Or are you just trying to get a certificate so you can go straight into work? So I created this little chart to kind of help you out. Obviously, one of the main differences between each one of these is the length of time that it takes. So the time to complete a program or a degree is usually about 4 years plus at a four-year college. I say plus because quite a few people actually will take more than 4 years to finish their degree, and that's perfectly fine. There's nothing wrong with that. Same thing with our 2-year degree. It's about 2 years plus, depending on how many classes you decide to take. And then our certificate programs are usually less than 2 years max. Okay. I've shown the degrees that are offered. So depending on what type of degree it is that you need for what you're trying to do will also influence the decision that you are going to make regarding where you decide to go. And then other important information I think that you should know is that for a 4-year degree, we're looking at specialized programs. So this is if you want to be a social worker, you want to be a teacher, that's when you would probably need to go to a 4-year institution. If you're looking at a 2-year degree, this is more career-focused program. So if you want to be a vet tech or you want a smaller degree in business, this is where a 2-year degree would come in handy. Now, our 2-year institutions tend to have more flexible class schedules. So Ivy Tech is one of the more popular 2-year institutions, and they have a wide variety of classes as well as schedules. And then the class size also tends to be a little bit smaller. So a certificate is actually something that typically prepares you for technical or skill-based jobs. So an example of this would be if you want to be a cosmetologist, or if you want to maybe be a mechanic, you might want to do a certificate program versus a 4-year degree, or maybe even a 2-year degree. Now I'll hand it over to Alyssa.
Great, thank you. So I'm going to briefly outline just general application requirements. So what most colleges and universities, especially if you're looking at 2-year or 4-year schools, are going to require for your application. So first would be obviously that completed application. Typically you can fill that out online. Some 4-year schools will be a part of the Common App. So you might have heard of the Common App before. It's used nationally. So there are hundreds of schools that are on the Common App. So for example, say you're interested in Purdue University, they only use the Common App, so you can apply to them through there. IUPUI, we are also on the Common App. So that's one way that you can apply to most 4-year universities. And then some schools, some colleges and universities will have their own application platform. So for example, all IU campuses, so this would include IU Bloomington, IUPUI. We also have our own application, which is called Apply IU, which is one that is just used if you're looking to apply to an IU campus. So that's typically, if you're looking at a 4-year university, sometimes a 2-year, you either apply to them via the Common App, which is like a third-party platform. Hundreds of schools are on it, or that school might have their own application platform in which you apply directly to them. Next is more and more schools are requiring the application essay. So this essay is an opportunity for you to share about yourself, your experiences, maybe what you want to major in, what you're interested in. It's an opportunity to share different things that you might be involved in. So if you're an athlete, if you play sports, if you've been involved in any extracurricular activities or student organizations, if you have a job, if you've ever done an internship, research, any volunteer work or community service, any and all of that looks really good on a college application essay. And that's kind of where you would highlight all of those different skills or experiences that you have that kind of highlight what you're interested in or what you're passionate about. And especially if it aligns with what you plan on studying once you are in college. Most application essays, a minimum is about a paragraph. So for example, if you do apply to IUPUI, ours we recommend between 200 and 400 words, which is basically a paragraph. You could write that in about 3 or 4 sentences. And usually you don't want to go over a page to 2 pages. So that's kind of the parameters of like how long should the essay be. At minimum, a paragraph, and at the very maximum, 2 pages. But again, it's an opportunity to really highlight all the different things that you've been involved in outside of the classroom. Third would also be, I don't have it listed here, but would it be your high school transcript that you'll also share with the school? So they'll look at your cumulative GPA. Some schools accept weighted, so make sure you ask that if the school accept weighted or unweighted GPAs. And that's also when they'll look at what type of classes you've been taking. So have you taken any honors classes, any dual credit classes? You would share that transcript with the schools that you're applying to. Next would be test scores. So if you've taken the SAT or ACT, you can also share that with the college. Like I mentioned, more and more schools are going test optional, which means it's up to you if you want to share those test scores or not. And I'll go into what test optional means exactly and, whether or not it's a good fit. But really, look at the college or university, see if test scores are being required. If they are required, you want to make sure that you either have an SAT or ACT to share with them, or both. You can also ask if schools are super scoring. And super scoring just means if you've taken that test more than once, they take the highest of both. So like maybe the first time you took, let's say, for example, the SAT, and you scored really high in the math and then not so high in like the reading section, but maybe the second time you took it, it was the opposite. Your reading went up or your math went down. Super scoring means they'll take the best of both. So if you've taken the test more than once, they'll take whichever one had your highest math score, and then they'll look at whichever one had your highest like reading comprehension score. And that's what super scoring is. But like I said, more and more schools are going test optional. So it means it's up to you if you want to share those test scores with them, if that school is test optional. And then lastly would be letters of recommendation. These are typically optional. Some colleges do require letters of recommendation. So just look into that. If it's optional, then again, it's up to you, kind of like the test scores. If you have letters of recommendation, then, go ahead and share those with the university. It can help with admissions. And then some will actually require them. If they are required, you want to make sure that your letters of recommendation are coming from a teacher, a counselor, a coach. If you've ever had a job or internship, then maybe your supervisor or employer. So someone who can speak to your academic skills or your work skills. So usually you don't want to ask like a friend or a family member. You want someone who, can speak to how you've been doing in school or at work, or like I said, if you've had a job or an internship, that's who you want to ask to write your letters of recommendation. But I'm going to talk a little bit more about the test optional and what that exactly means. So test optional, it is what it sounds like. It means that it's up to you. So that means that the university that you're applying to isn't requiring test scores. But if you have test scores and you want to share those, then they will accept them and then consider them in the admissions process. So again, we're talking about the SAT or ACT. So if you've taken one of those tests and you like your score, then you can go ahead and share one with them. Whichever one you've taken. Most schools don't have a preference, so whether it's the SAT or the ACT. But say you don't plan on taking it, if you haven't taken it, you don't plan to, or even if you did take the SAT or ACT and you didn't like your score, then it's not a requirement. You don't have to share that with the school. So test optional means you can share. If you share, then they will look at that when they're reviewing your application. But if you choose not to share, then they're not going to include that in the review process when they're looking at your application to that school. So again, it means it's not required, but it is an option. Some of the things that you should consider of whether or not you should share test scores is, one, look to see, will it affect your scholarship eligibility at that school? So maybe it's not required for admissions, but maybe there's a scholarship on that campus that does want to see test scores. Then maybe that is a time where, maybe not for admissions you share it, but maybe you share it for the scholarship. So think about that. Do any of the scholarships on that campus require test scores? Or will it improve your chances of getting that scholarship if you do choose to share test scores? And then second is if you're looking to be directly admitted into your program or major. So for example, say you're looking to come to IUPUI and you want to study business, and you want to be directly admitted into our Kelley School of Business. All of our schools, so IUPUI is test optional, so it means we don't require it, but if you do want to share, we will consider those. And all of our schools are as well. So all of our schools have direct admission requirements where you can either share test scores or not share test scores. And each school might be different. So, what Kelley School of Business is requiring might be different than what, our Purdue School of Engineering and Technology is requiring, or like our Heron School of Art. So look to see what your program is that you're interested in and if they are considering test scores and what that looks like. Because they'll have admissions to where you can be admitted without test scores. Usually to be directly admitted into a program without test scores, your GPA does need to be higher. And then they do have it where you can share test scores. And if you do choose to share test scores, then usually the GPA requirement is a little bit lower. So those are things to consider when you're looking at, should I share my test scores or not, or should I take the test or not? And then second is sometimes you will see scholarships or schools that are test blind. So if a school says that it is test blind, that means they will not consider test scores in the application process. So test optional means you have the choice. Test blind means they will not look at them at all. So for example, on the IUPUI campus, we do have a scholarship that is part of our Honors College. It's the Honors College program. Our Honors College is actually test blind. So that means if you want to be to the Honors College program, they do not look at test scores at all. So they, even if you do have them, they're not going to look at your SAT or ACT. They're looking at other things for your application. So maybe it's the essay, it's the letters of recommendation, it's the GPA. So just note the difference between those two. Test optional, you can share test scores. Test blind means they will not look at test scores at all, whether that be for admissions or a scholarship. And then when should you apply? Oh, go ahead.
Great. And Alyssa, I just wanted to let you know we are wrapping things up. So maybe if you could wrap up these last few slides in the next minute or so, and then we'll shift to questions.
Okay. Yep. That's totally fine. So just going to go over some dates and deadlines. When should you apply? August 1st is usually when applications open for most schools. Some schools do have early decision deadlines. So like, for example, if you're looking at IU Bloomington, which means they want your application in by November 1st. And then some schools do rolling admissions, which means they will accept applications for the entire academic year. So for example, IUPUI, we work on rolling admissions. So you can apply to us all the way up through May 1st. Just know, when our scholarship deadlines, when our housing deadlines. deadlines. And then that enrollment deposit deadline is usually May 1st. So that's when you want to make that decision. So typically August 1 all the way to May 1st is that whole application process timeline. And if you go to the next one. So just another one is when you're looking at how to decide, where you should go once you've applied and been admitted to all these schools is number one, review your financial aid package. So look to see how much you're being offered in scholarships and grants from that school. Make sure that you look at the program and major. So, that you're looking at does have the program you're interested in, the major you're interested in. It has all the different things, resources to support you. And then lastly, just make sure that you visit that campus. If you've applied, make sure you check them out, go there, get a good feel, and see if it's the right fit for you. And I believe that's it. Oh, tips. Yeah.
No, we can go to questions, but we'll leave these tips up here for you all as you're applying. Just things to keep in mind. You always want to use your full legal name. If not, it can get a little messy. And then make sure you're saving everything, documenting everything that you submit, and make sure that any interaction that you're having with the university via email, person, telephone, you're treating it as a first impression. So
absolutely. Great advice, Karina, and Alyssa, thank you as well. We really appreciate you sharing all this helpful information with the students. We have received one question, and it is about students transferring specifically from Ivy Tech to a four-year institution, which I know a lot of students do. Mm-hmm. So Virginia asked, she said, I was wondering how the process would look like if we plan to first apply to a two-year community college and then a four-year college like IUPUI. She said, would we have to restart the process in applying, or could we easily transfer class credits? And then she also said, and what could we do if some of those credits are not transferable?
Yep, that's a really good question. So especially if you're looking at Ivy Tech, IUPUI actually has a really strong partnership with Ivy Tech, where we have what we call 2-in-2 programs or transfer as a junior program, so that all of the classes that you were taking at Ivy Tech are going to directly count towards your degree with IUPUI. As far as transferring credits, as long as you received a grade of a C or higher in your Ivy Tech classes, we will accept those credit hours. You will see those on your IUPUI transcript. It's just making sure that the two programs are aligned. So for example, if you want to go into business, and so for Ivy Tech, you go into their business administration program, that program directly feeds into our Kelley School of Business. So if you finish your associate's degree with Ivy Tech, just using business as an example, you'll start at IUPUI as a junior. All those 2 years of classes will count as your first 2 years at IUPUI. And so you only have 2 years left with IUPUI, with everything that you've done at Ivy Tech. So as long as the programs align, all of those classes that you took at Ivy Tech will count towards your degree at IUPUI.
And one of the things I tell students is if that's your plan, tell your academic advisor as soon as you meet with them, so they make sure that the classes are going to align as best as possible. I know we got another question about, can you apply to multiple colleges, or do you have to pick one?
You can apply to as many as you are interested in. So there's no limit. You can apply to all the different schools. And really, that May 1st deadline I was talking about, that enrollment deposit deadline, that's really when schools expect you to make that decision. So, for example, say you've applied to IUPUI and Purdue and Marion and Franklin. You have all the way till May 1st to kind of say, yes, I do plan to go to, and then, insert school. So you can apply as many as you're interested in, and then you have until May 1st to make that decision of where you plan to go.
This is great. Let's take one last question and then we'll wrap things up. And Karina and Alyssa, I don't know if you would feel comfortable putting your contact information in the chat, but if so, I'm sure you'd be okay with students following up with you or just simply reaching out to the general admissions at IUPUI. But the last question we will take is from a junior. She says, I am a junior. Is it recommended that I start applying to colleges before my senior year or just wait until senior year? Alyssa, could you answer that one for us?
Yep. Yeah, you definitely want to wait until your senior year. The only exception to that is if you plan to graduate as a junior, but really it's the year that you plan to graduate. So if you're graduating your senior year, then wait till your senior year So that August 1st date would be August 1st of your senior year, or August 1st of the year that you know you're going to graduate from high school, because that's how long applications stay active, is for 1 year. So yeah, wait till your senior year, or at least the year you plan to graduate.
Excellent. Well, we surely do appreciate your time, Karina and Alyssa. Thank you so much. And thanks to all the students for joining us. This does conclude this particular presentation.